It's about growing as a person. Your best is completely unique to you. Thanks for joining us. This is episode 3 of Fuck Perfect. I'm here with Poppy Sprague. It's nice to have you. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on.
My pleasure.
We were just talking about how I went to Tony Robbins' event. Probably to bleep that out. Went to this event where we kind of crossed paths afterwards. But when I started listening to Tony Robbins on audio CD, I knew I was in a very negative place, and I had negative beliefs, negative mindset, and I know my family would bond with each other with either antagonizing each other, or we find a common enemy and then we feel good because there was relief from our tension, and we get to criticize something that wasn't in our control. And listening to Tony Robbins, it made me have this idea, like, I can choose to think differently. Like, that's a choice I have. That opened I can't say literally, but just it really opened the floodgates for me in my mind, my mindset and my beliefs, thinking I have power over this. I can choose, I can change this, or I can go a different way. And I just started noticing it was like putting on glasses, and all of a sudden, anytime someone started being just judgmental, critical, whether it was family or friends or coworkers, I would just get hyper aware, and it would turn me off, like not in a attracted way, like, but just like, man, that's just gross. I don't want to even hear this. Let's just change the topic. Why do you have to focus on that? And even maybe to this day, I struggle with that a little bit when people go off the rails with their negativity. I'm just like, whoa, what's going good right now in your life? Let's focus on that. So that's what led me to go to UPW, which led me to have more amazing breakthroughs and meet someone like you. And I know I've connected with you a bit on private message, and I have also I've just seen, interacted with things you share. And one of the reasons I wanted to ask you, one of the very first people, is I've noticed that you transcend social media. Like, I feel like you are one of the very few that break the barrier of a device you break the barrier of a device or social media, where I think you communicate and express your presence and your charisma and your aura, your energy. Like, it just comes through when I see things that you have shared on social media. I'm like, wow, she is so authentic and so happy and positive and radiant. Like, it just always comes through when I see your content.
Oh, bless you.
And so that's why I was like, I'm gonna get her. I'm gonna invite her and see if she comes on.
You're making my week. That's I feel very moved by that. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, if you won't mind sharing anything, like maybe in your life, where did you seek perfection in a certain area?
Well, firstly, I'm a bit of a control freak. So tell me, because I'd like to do this in whatever way you would like. Tell me the boundaries of this. What would you like from me? What's a yes? What's a no? Anything, whatever sort of culture you'd like to set up for this.
Oh, no boundaries. We'll play by ear and let it be raw, and we'll see where it goes.
Okay. What can I F?
Oh, you can say whatever you want.
Okay. And where is this going? What are we going to do?
Oh, okay. So it's going to go on, obviously, Spotify, YouTube, and eventually when Apple approves the podcast, it takes a little bit of time. It'll be up there.
Beautiful. Wow. I'm so flattered. Okay, let's go.
So what's your story? Share your story. How did you get here?
Well, firstly, do we know, you can say, listen, Poppy, go this way, go that way, less information, more. You can guide me, obviously.
Okay, sure.
I'm very talentable. Do we know why you're doing the podcast? What led you to do this?
What led me, the whole concept for me has been to help people seek progress over perfection.
Right.
Because perfection is just setting yourself up for pain. You're never going to get it. And the realization, the irony is that every person is already perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Just stop seeking perfection. That's the part where I say, fuck perfect. Stop seeking that perfection. We are perfect already. Now we just go and do what we want and make progress where we want to go. Right.
Beautiful. I love that. Okay, good. Whatever you'd like, let's talk.
Okay. So let's share your story. How did you get to where you are today?
Gosh, well,
Conceptually.
it really depends on the day how I look at this, really. But across time, obviously, like you, my perspective has changed on probably everything. So as a kid, I was very, what's the word? Insecure and not psychologically not very well, basically. Both of my parents are therapists, and I grew up, I think, supporting their mission, which is a beautiful one, to serve others, to help others heal and catharsis and so on. And I think I kind of deferred to them in a way as a good girl, wanting to have their philosophy and do things their way, but also sort of quite like with a, you know, Oscar-winning actor and actress, I was sort of the supporting role, and that was the kind of setup. I'm sure they wouldn't, they might be a little bit saddened by that, but that's how it felt across my time. And amongst the process of that, there's a lot of costs to us as a family, and the kids involved, and them and their energy and so on. So I witnessed, for good, for bad, you know, it reminds me of Tony Robbins. Really affected me when I was at Date with Destiny, where he said, you know, if you're going to blame people for all the bad stuff, you really have got to blame them for all the good. That really impacted me. You got to blame them for all the good stuff too.
Absolutely.
And it changed my perspective, because they'd been heroes and still are heroes to me. But I also held quite a bit of resentment, feeling I didn't get a lot of the things that I should have done as a kid. I grew up very quickly.
You know, it's interesting you say that, is in the last few months, even though I've heard Tony Robbins say it, I've really felt like I've started to believe it, especially with my parents. And it's like, I felt like there's so many things I think that they should have done, or I had the resentment, like I can't go back and change it. Right. And I thought, wow, if all of the good and the bad that they did, that's made me who I am today, then I guess I'm very grateful for even the stuff I didn't get. So now I don't resent it.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, holy wow, this whole relationship dynamic that I have in my mind, this is actually much better.
Yeah, exactly. My mother and I, we still say it today, but even as a kid, we used to say to each other, I'm glad I picked you. Meaning she picked me as the daughter and I picked her as the mother. And I've always meant that. And as life has gone on, I've really meant that, you know, for all of her, wow, she is quite a woman in every way. You know, I'm so grateful. As similarly with my father and my siblings, is I am the person I am today. And it's like that idea of failure. You know, people will often say to me things like, you know, how do you know what you know? And you're quite expert in some areas. And I said, well, through failure, through
Right.
trying, through being a mess, etc. And it often spurs me on. Recently, there was a challenge that I had, and I thought, I was quite tearful at myself, actually. And I thought, good for you, because you've tried and you've leapt, and now you can learn, and everything's for your greatest growth and expansion, etc. Which has been, as I've moved through life and studied and messed up, a different mindset, as opposed to other people wouldn't have done this and I'm a failure and how embarrassing and I'm ashamed of my behavior or whatever, not quick enough, not bright enough. Whereas now I'm my own hero in many ways. There's plenty of stuff I don't know where I F up quite frequently, and I'm a student of life for life, but I've become very proud of my ability to leap, which is what they taught me, is to, you know, there's nothing about being dull, which is not to put on people who are dull, because there's many, which is simply you dull yourself down. We're all phenomenal, and I know that because I've met so many people, but we kind of pacify and minimize because a lot of us want to fit in, and if you stand out you get attacked and whatever fantasies we have. So
I just
yeah,
recently watched a video where they talked about like how if you ask a child, what are your skills or what are you good at, like a talent show, they're like, well, I can juggle, I can do this, I can do karate, da,
exactly.
da. You ask an adult, what are you good at? They're like, nothing. I'm like, whoa,
Yeah,
whoa, whoa.
yeah,
You're good at something.
yeah, yeah. There
Yeah.
was a guy, actually, interestingly, that we're talking about San Francisco just now. What was it? He said we were on the tram, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I was very, very young, and my mother said like this because the tram was moving, and I think the door was open, and the conductor said something like this: "It's okay. She doesn't have any fear yet. She's gonna be fine." And it always, either she told me the story or I remember, and I thought, wow, yeah, perhaps on reflection, you know, as adults, we get cultured into this, it's going to go wrong, look for the feared object, that 2 million-year-old brain's kicked in.
Right.
Whereas as a kid, it's kind of, everything's a yes. And I think as a younger kid, I was like that. And somewhere along the way, I think I became very fearful of a lot. And it really, I crippled myself really emotionally, like a lot of people do. So there's a long story, obviously, like with any of us. And I
Right.
became a therapist. I think it was very ironic. My parents always used to say, we love you kids as you are, whatever you want to do. However, I became a therapist like my mother, and my
Mm-hmm.
brothers became artists like my dad. So it's like, you buggers, you've manipulated us in some kind of a way. But I was a therapist and a teacher, and used to teach doctoral students, and I felt there's so much wrong with the profession, and part of that was me making excuses about why I didn't have to engage properly with my own therapy.
Sure.
But equally, I thought, you know, many of us classically in psychotherapy, we don't look at ourselves enough.
Mm-hmm.
We can lament over, you know, what went wrong, but there's an energy of propelling, a progressive that I didn't come across in psychotherapy, and I studied very widely for many years and still do. And where was it I went? It was certainly Tony Robbins that pushed this into me as well. Yeah, it was really him who asked the question. I've been in therapy since I was 10. I've studied therapy since I was, well, knee high to a grasshopper, as they say, because I watched my parents work. Literally, I went into group therapy with them. I watched them since I was in the crib, which is a bit of a effort. But again, I am who I am today. Where he said, what do you want? And in psychotherapy, the question is, what brings you? What's the problem? You
Absolutely.
know, blah, blah, blah. So I became a coach and realized it's transformational psychology that I do. It looks very deeply at the pain and the trauma, and which, you know, I remember I was out to dinner once with a friend of mine. She's a professor of psychoanalysis, and we had this big long chat about what's the definition of trauma. She had her view, because she was actually traumatized. That's where it came from at the time. She'd been bullied, ironically enough, by a big organization that she was part of. And I came out with, and we were like, yes, we've got it. You know, the definition of trauma in my mind, that she agreed with me, is feeling overwhelmed and alone in it. Whereas a lot of people consider trauma as, you know, you have your life literally threatened by war or whatever it is. But if you think about, particularly as a child, how it is to be left, or experience that your sense is you're left, and therefore you're unsafe, and therefore you could die. That is trauma. So there's so much, but ultimately I thought that psychotherapy training isn't enough. And I'd worked with very, very damaged people, as well as, you know, all kinds of spectrum of health, and thought we need a progressive mindset to come out of this. You know, what's your story, but equally, what will you do about it? This kind of, you know, how can you serve from that place, or what's the point in us? Gary Z, I was teaching this morning, came to mind, you know, in terms of his, I think this is the figure, we have a 1 in 4 zillion chance, or whatever chance of being here, born to the parents we are, with the, you know, physiological makeup, etc. There's got to be a reason that we're put on this planet. And particularly working with really very damaged people, is we've got to do something with this brilliant thing that you've survived. And I wanted to help people with their life force, so that they could see what I see, my clinical supervisor, you have that if you're a good therapist, said to me once, I think you're very romantic about people. I think you see people's potential more than is actually possible for them to ever see, because I work with psychotics and all kinds of people. And I thought, you've got a point there, love. But I also thought, well, oftentimes when you've seen pain and you've been humiliated and you've had shame, you have humility and you have belief and so on. And I thought, you know, some people don't want to, because they're so connected with their story, see their potential. But it's very easy to see someone's potential when you've kind of felt broken and survived it. Because I didn't think I'm a strong person, but I've been through a lot. Is I can see the potential in somebody else because I didn't have it at the time.
Yeah, that reminds me of when I think we talk about Tony Robbins a lot. He mentioned how if you talk to someone, hey, my goal is to buy $1 million house, and they're in $1 million house, they're like, okay, I know it can be done, and they want to, like, they think how you're going to get there. But if you tell someone that you want $1 million if who's like barely making ends meet to living in an apartment, they're less likely to believe you, right?
Yeah.
And the idea is like if that person already experienced what you're going through or what you want, it's like you can kind of guide them. And I often will see the same thing. In my kind of coaching business, I'll see so much potential in people, and I'm trying to get them there. And like I know they can do it. I know they can get there. And I do actually get more attached to their progress than maybe they do. And I get really invested in it. And I remember when I was training to become a teacher at college, and I think it was like Maslow's hierarchy or Maslow's needs, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we're doing that, and like I said, I don't feel like this covers it. I don't believe this is everything.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, what's missing? I'm like, I don't know yet. Like, first off, I'm like 20. I don't know yet. But looking back,
probably did unconsciously. You probably
I
did.
think it's like this like happiness and gratitude. Like the gratitude I think is missing from that. Because I'm like, this can't be all this is, right? And I remember when I was going to become a teacher, when I was actually a teacher, and the things I made my students feel was safe and respected, were safe and valued, like they're good enough.
Yeah.
And everything else, my dirty secret was that I didn't really teach the lesson plans. I just kind of let the classes go where they needed to go. I let students express themselves how they needed to express themselves. And all of a sudden, when we were getting these standardized tests done, my kids were performing at a level which was the school's goal, and they were sort of envious of what things were happening, or at least the test that I was giving, they were performing really well on. So school comes in and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" So I show them, because I mean they're observing me now. They're like, "Whoa, you need to be doing this."
Yeah.
I'm like, but I already have the result you want.
Yeah.
So well, the problem is that you're so romantic about the result. About the procedure, and I'm romantic about the result, right? And so that's why I parted ways of being a teacher. I couldn't take that level of like, why are you telling me I can't help people when what you're doing is not help? So side tangent. Sorry, continue with.
Well, I think it's all one and the same thing, because wouldn't it be wonderful if they had the wisdom really to support you in your dynamism, to say, wow, this is another piece of the puzzle, we can do both. And that was the same reason why I left teaching, aside from just I like being my own boss, is I've studied people long enough to, again, I'm a student of life for life, but not long enough to know what works. And when there's a clinical kind of cognitive approach to humanity, it doesn't cut the mustard, because that's not what we're about. We need this sense that we're special, and this kind of advancing, we've got something that you can't study or learn intellectually. And if we don't feed that in people, they become dull, you know?
Yeah.
So as teachers, it seems to me a cardinal sin to not be able to have the freedom as individuals to put our own spin on it, and people can take what they want and leave what they don't. So in a similar way that you're talking, I mean, what a marvelous teacher you are, to be able to say, you know, in your own way, let's see what you think and feel, and let's mold it from there and project it from there. And you can see the diamond in the kind of uncut bit for people.
Yeah, it's like having being like emotionally aware or emotional intelligence, where like you know, if you're a therapist, obviously, and you have different techniques that you can go through, like you don't just start applying them blindly. You're like, where is this person at?
Exactly.
What do they need? And that's the problem. That's the difference between, say, coaching and teaching, which I love. Is like, okay, where's the person at? Where do they want to go? And what do they need to get there?
Yes.
And that's like the most phenomenal process. And everyone, have you ever read Carol Dweck's book, Growth Mindset?
No.
Growth Mindset.
I've heard that a lot, actually, about that book.
It's phenomenal, but a lot of it's like, yeah, I get that, I know that, but it's just how it's phrased. She was like a professor at Stanford, and how some people will think, oh, I'm just not good at this, and it's a fixed mindset, or I just don't have the right talent. And there's a growth mindset, like I'll get there, or it's okay to make mistakes. It's the classic story of a tortoise and the hare, where the tortoise just kept going with consistency, you know, and the hare just, everyone thought that story is like, when you hear it the first time, oh, the rabbit's really fast.
Yeah.
And so it's like that growth mindset's like, okay, well, how can I get there?
Yeah.
Right. And I love that question. How, you know, what's it going to take? How can I get there?
Absolutely. A strategy, and equally to rehearse in our minds, which oftentimes people, we are educated out of imagination.
Mm-hmm.
Who was it? John Lennon, who's, you know, apparently the story is his teacher said, you know, what is success to you, or something like that, and he said happiness, and she said, I don't think you understood the question, and he said, well, I don't think you understood the answer. The idea that we rehearse in our minds what it looks like to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's the how question, and there's also the why, and what does it look like if the greater version of me, which we need coaching to see, in my view, what would that part of me be doing? It's kind of like this morning, I get up at 4 generally, and I thought, I don't want to exercise today, you know, bugger it, one day off. And I spoke to the 10-year-older self, who said, come on, hello, this is how you get to me. So I thought, all right, we pulled the covers back. So there's this very motivational part of us. If we are coached, and again, in my opinion, we need guidance and mentorship to be better, like tribes, which is why there's not addictions and suicide in tribes generally, because they have a village to raise them. But that sense of how, but equally, what does it look like? And the fantasy and the consistency and the repetition, you know, repetition being the mother of all skill. But equally, I work with the subconscious, the unknown. And the subconscious just wants repetition. It wants something to trust, quite like a kid. They don't really care what you're doing. Just keep doing it so I can rely on and predict and feel safe and secure.
Certainty and safety.
Yeah. So in order to shift anything, we need repetition, so that the subconscious actually is the, you know, it drives action, which is why often we think intellectually, I want this. It's often why, you know, personal development courses and so on don't shift us long term, because we need to look at what the subconscious material is that's actually overriding it, because it's not embedded. We need to do it over and over and over again, rehearsing.
When I teach yoga at some of my fitness classes, they're like, oh man, I hate yoga. I'm like, well, how often do you do yoga? Like, hardly ever. I'm like, that's why you hate it.
Yeah, right.
That's why you need it.
You get the buzz, right? When you something becomes a habit.
Yeah. So I'm curious, in your health, was there ever a time that you sought was it to never miss a workout? Was it to seek this perfect ideal body image? Like, did you ever have that going and then just abandon that for that progress?
I.e. perfection over, what is that what you mean? Did I have this?
Yeah. Did you used to ever like try to be perfect? Like, have you ever gone on a diet trying to like eat the exact right amount of calories and overstress yourself out, or and then you change it to be just kind of, I'm getting better, versus like, I need to be perfect at this every day?
Absolutely. There's been a process of, I think what's probably one of the most challenging things for people is to love yourself as you are. I was teaching this morning about this story. I don't know that we've got time, but it's a phenomenal story. And I think that there's lots of sort of arguments for this, but I think it's where the saying, the grass is always greener in the other pasture comes from, which is the story of Russell Conwell, who, oh gosh, it's such a long story, but it's the story of the acre of diamonds, where basically a farmer sells his farm in Africa looking for diamonds because he's told that, you know, there's all these creeks full of diamonds on the continent. So he sells his farm and goes running around the place trying to find these diamonds because he's been told, you know, it's the secret to all the riches you could ever imagine, and ends up at the end of his life depleted and, you know, I'm a failure, I never found the effing diamonds, and jumps into a river and kills himself basically. Meanwhile, the farmer that bought his little farm, which is on the African continent where the diamonds are, goes, you know, walking across the creek and discovers this beautiful, shiny, you know, blue and red thing in the water, picks it up, and this great big rock, and thinks, oh, that looks a bit interesting, puts it on his mantelpiece, and a few weeks later, a visitor comes and says, do you know what this is? And he said, no, I was just curious about it. And he said, it's one of the biggest diamonds ever discovered. Oh my God. So the farmer kind of goes, well, that's interesting, because the whole creek is filled with these crystals, I thought they were. So the moral of the story being, you know, that the original farmer didn't do his research to see what does a diamond in its form look like. You know, and he made assumption about what diamonds look like and didn't look at his own backyard, basically. And so many of us do that, like what you're saying with a lot of mindsets and students. We just don't know any better to have a look within and without at our own diamonds and what they look like, rather than comparing ourselves to every bugger else. Oh, riches happen to other people, or they're outside of me. And of course, then we're always looking outside, but equally we're all looking at our, you know, competitor. And oftentimes if things look better, sometimes it isn't, and it's a perception, but also sometimes people are just bettering at watering their patch and taking care of themselves, and habits and discipline thriving. So I was epically unhealthy growing up with all of these methods of trying to manipulate my body and my mind, and had many, for decades, deep depressions, and, you know, more than that, until I discovered through people like Tony Robbins and actually applying myself, because something wasn't working for me, I discovered that, of course, mood is in the gut. So apart from the environment, and you become it, and the people you become it, and so on, who you surround yourself with, I thought, well, gosh, I've been starving myself for decades. No wonder I've had these extreme mood dips and so on. No psychiatrist or doctor or anybody said, well, one, what's happening in your environment which might be affecting your mood, but equally nobody. And it may be that they would have, and it didn't go in, and did, and I wasn't ready to hear it. But you know, wow, what I was eating and not eating really affected me. So across time I thought, well, if I want healthy life, maybe, and this was actually in the midst of suicide, I thought, I looked in the mirror, taken an overdose, and thought, if you know, maybe try another approach, which might be to take responsibility rather than poor me, and think about what it is you need to do to achieve the body, the health, the riches that you want. How about actually working for it rather than trying to manipulate yourself, starve yourself emotionally, physically, every which way, compare myself with everybody else, look at everybody else's effing diamond, and try that. So I did, and learned the things for thriving, the things that successful people do. I teach this Monday to Friday. What are the common denominators that people who are happy, wealthy, you know, and wise, what are they doing? And copy them. And that's what I did. So now I'm the healthiest and the oldest, clearly, that I've ever been. Going, if you want something, how about studying people who've got it and equally applying yourself, rather than just lamenting over everybody else's lucky? Which, who is it? Earl Nightingale makes me laugh. He says, People who say someone is lucky haven't been, oh, what is it? It's such a good, lucky as the uninitiated call it, he says.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning they're not in the gang because they haven't been initiated into this. It's not about luck, it's about application and having a look at what's possible.
Right.
So yeah, I moved from
I'll have people tell me, like, before I had kids, oh, you're lucky you can be in fitness, you don't have kids. And now I'll tell people will tell me, oh, you're lucky you have kids, they motivate you to be fit. And it's like, you're kidding me, right? Like, this is ridiculous. It's a no-win battle. And when you brought up, like, the grass is always greener, to me, that, like, it really resonated with me growing up. I knew my mom was a grass is always greener person. And I remember call me like a coach nerd or a kind of psychological nerd. When I was 6 years old, I would play in my room. I had a desk and I had like these Dr. Seuss books, and I would imagine that I had a little steno legal notepad. I would imagine women coming in talking to me about their problems while their kids would read my Dr. Seuss books. And so
how old were you?
6.
Good.
6. And I subconsciously was kind of on this path of trying to figure out how to make my mom happy and happy with what she has, right? And as time goes on, I kind of saw her struggling with a little bit of health problems, and then toward the end, she was, dealing with her battle with cancer for 9 years, and then she passed away. But that's when, like, everything about my life became study happiness and health, right? And then it led me to, like, okay, how can I help myself be this? Because that's what I wanted. I wanted myself to be happy and healthy. Then as I'm learning it and I'm looking to seeing all these people, I'm like, holy shit, this is not good. I need to help others now be focused on happy and healthy. And I was reading The Happiness Advantage this year by Sean Acor, who talks about how the formula of success people think is you work hard, you achieve success, then you're happy. And he's like, nope, it's you're happy first, you work hard, you achieve success. And that's kind of flipping the script and me focusing on, okay, just choose happiness. There's just nothing wrong. Just choose it. It's already in you. You just got, it's not a reward. Right. So that's when you were talking about the diamonds and the grass is always greener. I'm like, yeah, this is 100% like the summary of my beginning. How I got here,
Me too.
Awesome.
It is that kind of idea that, people who are, I don't know, they have a good role or a good position in a business or something. The assumption that, they have a good attitude because they have this great life, as opposed to the idea that they have this wonderful, good position because they had a great attitude, not the other way around. The attitude doesn't come after the happiness, the joy. That it's that kind of acting as if stuff that people talk about. And something that impacted me very much was, who was it talks about this? All kinds of people tell this story of the guy who sits in front of the fire and says, give me warmth. And, if the fire could talk, this is my psychotherapeutic little, twist on it. If the fire could talk, it would be kind of like, abso-flippin'-lutely, you can have all the fire, warmth you like, but hello, how about the wood, please? That we're waiting for proof, and we're waiting for the goods rather than, what is it I get to do in order to be part of the process, which comes all the satisfaction and the pride and the, healthy pride and so on. And I think that's so much of what we just don't know because we're not educated is we want instant gratification. Right now, me, rather than, and it's not about, I don't want to do the work. It's about being on the journey, seeing who we are as a consequence of the challenges we face and how we respond to them. There's like fun.
Absolutely. I agree 100% with that. Yeah.
What a pleasure to talk to you. It's been lovely.
It was awesome really connecting with you and talking. Still love your energy. Love the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Likewise.
for coming on.
Like attracts like, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you
Absolutely.
for the invite.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And if you want, I can put some links and information how to connect with you if people hear this and want to connect with you. Because you're coaching, or do you offer coaching as well?
Both. It depends on the client.
Right.
And I have group programs and online virtual school and all kinds of different things. So I don't, often business people say this isn't very wise, but I don't really have a niche. I've worked with people for many, many years, and if people are there, I'm interested, and I can offer
I'm
what
the
I like.
same. I'm the same way. As soon as I started coaching and I just started helping people, then I got a little more serious and like got help and like, oh, you got to have a niche. I'm like,
Hmm.
what? Why? Like everyone needs this. Oh, well, who do you relate to best? I'm like, I don't really care. Like I'm there to
Yeah,
help the person. Uh,
exactly.
and so maybe I've shot myself in the foot, but at the same time, like I am not someone who's going for the width of people I help, more so the
Yeah.
depth.
Yeah, quite. And to me, we all have the same issue at heart. So I have programs for
Okay.
people who want coaching. I have psychotherapy. It depends on the person,
Yeah. Just message me over the affirmation, and I'll put it in the notes of the episode so people can
Perfect.
contact you if you want.
Yeah, easy to see. It's all
Thank
on the
you so
website.
much, Poppy. I
My
appreciate it.
absolute pleasure. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you.